This is Focus with Jack Caudill.
Good evening, I'm Jack Caudill. Welcome to this month's edition of Focus. This month we're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women. Two guests with us to talk about that. Lily Mendoza is the founder of the Red Ribbon Skirt Society here in Rapid City. Also joining us, a member of that group and two other groups as well, Darla Black from the Pine Ridge Reservation. A little background before we go any further. In some areas of the country, the murder rates of Native American women is up to 10 times the national average for all other races. The Urban Indian Health Institute says murder is the third leading cause of death for Native American women in the country. And the National Institute of Health found that 84% of American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced violence at some point during their lifetime. We're going to start with you, Lily. What goes through your mind when you hear those numbers, those statistics?
Well, they're real staggering. We know that probably those numbers and those percentages are probably a lot higher if you look at it from the historical perspective. From first contact onto this land, we know that this was happening hundreds of years ago. And I don't think it was until the last few years, I would say probably those are from 2016, that they came up with those statistics. But we know far before that, that those numbers and those percentages would be so much more higher.
Darla, how about you? When you hear those figures, personally, what does that mean to you? What does that say to you when you hear those?
Well, when I hear those figures, that I agree with Lily that there's a lot more. Like on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, when they first brought up MMIW there, it was all the families that were self-reporting how many missing women that they had within their families. And I think the last I heard was 74 names that had transpired. And I think that was in 2016 too.
What are some of the challenges in figuring out exactly how many people we're talking about, how many murdered people we're talking about, how many missing people we're talking about?
The challenges are data. Law enforcement not keeping data. Braveheart Society and I, when I was the vice president, met with the chief of police. At that time, which was in 2016, they had no data. No data on anyone missing on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And to this date, there is no standard protocol as to how to address a person that's missing. And there's one I don't know if it's procedure, if it's law, but if they report somebody missing, it's a requirement for them to wait 24 hours. And that is difficult because 24 hours, if one of our women go missing, 24 hours is crucial, very crucial timing to start looking for them. Were they abducted? What happened? You know, so there's a lot, I would say there's a lot of laws that need to be changed. Legislation needs to be built, and I think protocols within law enforcement. We're seeing that all across not just the in Indian country, but we're seeing it in the States. All across the United States, there's really no standard protocols for missing and murdered Indigenous women.
How do you see those challenges? Trying to figure out exactly how widespread this problem really is.
Well, you know, I mean, it's a huge problem across the United States, across in Canada. And so what we're doing to try and combat that problem is building partnerships in our community. So one of the things that we are doing is working with our local law enforcement and meeting with them on a regular basis and actually sharing back and forth if somebody has gone missing, if they've been found. And, you know, we're kind of crossing borders. And we're doing that via Facebook and working with different reservations, with law enforcement. You know, like we're working with the police department in Nebraska. And so there are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of blockades that we face on a constant basis. And that is, reporting is pretty huge. It's pretty huge. So that's something we continue to work on. But one of the other more important things that we really do work on too is working with the families of the victims and helping them through that process of grief and how we can best do that for those families and community.
Now, the figures we talked about earlier were national figures.
Yep.
Here in this area, how bad is the problem here? What are we dealing with here in the Black Hills area?
You know, across, our project, the Red Ribbon Skirt Society, part of our project is we have a healing room okay? And that's located right next to our MMIW office, which is located downtown. And I can tell you right now that we have 83 plus red dresses and names in that room of missing and murdered Indigenous women, okay? And we know that that number is high, and that's a collective number from across our state, you know, some from Rapid City, some from the surrounding reservations. And kind of the issue that we face is once that person is taken across into a reservation, then it's really difficult for our law enforcement here in Rapid City because once they've crossed jurisdictions, then that's a whole other issue, okay? And some of the numbers, the number that Darla gave, that also I think is an old number. And so it gets back to that data, but the data that we collect are those names of the families that we know, and going all the way back to as early as, you know, 1958 or 1950, whatever, okay? And families are coming to us and saying, hey, my relative was a missing and murdered Indigenous woman, because they didn't know what to call it. You know, so now we named it, so they can come to us with that information, and then we can go ahead and document that for those families.
Now, you talk about the families and the people that you know. Any idea how big the scope is of the ones you don't know about, that you haven't heard about?
I'm going to let Darla answer that question.
I think if we look at the numbers, and we look at, in lieu of what happened in Pine Ridge with the two young women that were missing, one of the things that I've seen is that it's the families that are self-reporting. And when those two young ladies went missing, it was the families that went out searching. They would not give up. They searched relentlessly. And eventually, emergency management joined in and law enforcement. And so I think even back then, there was no standard protocol. So a lot of it is just the family self-reporting. And the same thing in Canada. Canada, the same thing, the families are the ones that are self-reporting. Around Canada and down here in the beginning, prior to this awareness, if you went to a law enforcement department and said so-and-so is missing, most of the time they didn't document it. So if you go down, if you pick random police departments right now and you ask them, what data do you have regarding any missing personnel? People that are, the personnel are going to tell you they don't have them because they didn't take it seriously. But now that missing and murdered Indigenous women is hitting home now, not just in Rapid City, because here in Rapid City we have Larissa Lonehill missing. Still, no, it was like she vanished. And so I think the more awareness, the more prevention, the more teaching that we give the community. And Savannah's Act was one of the other problems that they discovered was that data, once again. Like Lily mentioned, you have tribal law enforcement, you have state law enforcement, and you have federal. So if a person goes missing on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, there's potential homicide, so it invokes the federal system too. So you have three different separate jurisdictions. They don't work together most of the time, except for the fact that what happened with the two that went missing in Pine Ridge, they did work together, and eventually when law enforcement did get involved, you know, I commend them also, because good law enforcement, they were able to identify suspects in it. And so if we had a standard protocol in place right now that followed that model, that what happened down there, I think we would catch the people that are doing these things to our women.
Now, you talked about Canada. What kind of parallels are there between what you're seeing here and the First Nations up in Canada?
They're more advanced because they've been dealing with missing and murdered women for a long time. Because of the Highway of Tears, they named it Highway of Tears. I was invited to Winnipeg by the Dakota tribe there, and I prayed with them, and then they did ceremonies at the Highway of Tears. One of the things that I saw there is they're more advanced. They're a little more advanced, the MMIW organizations, and they're all working together to try to solve the problem. They're running into the same thing, the same issues there with our CMP, their law enforcement too. So I think what needs to happen all across, not just the United States, but all across the world, is we need a standard protocol to protect our Indigenous women, because now they're even getting younger. They're getting younger and younger. And a lot of that ties in from violence, domestic violence, drugs, human trafficking. You know, it all ties into missing and murdered Indigenous women at some point or another.
All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll continue our look at missing and murdered Indigenous women when we come back with this month's edition of Focus. I'm Jack Caudill. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus. This month we're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women. Lily Mendoza is the founder of the Red Ribbon Skirt Society. Lily, you talked earlier about the red dresses you have down there in your healing room. Your group is the Red Ribbon Skirt Society. What is the significance of the red dresses?
Okay. You know, it's become a national symbol across the United States and Canada. And one of the things with the red is that from what we understand and know is that red is the color that spirits can see. So it's the dress, of course, is the woman, and the red, of course, is that with the spirits. And so it's something that has actually come down from Canada. And so that's why we use that symbol along with the red hat. We use that as well. And so it's very symbolic. So when we have in our healing room, we have those red dresses. And on those red dresses then are the names of the women that have been murdered and are still missing. And so anytime we go out in community and we do education and awareness campaigns, we always use that red dress.
Now, how about the red hand painted over the mouth? Also another symbol of the movement.
You know, there's a couple of different things with that, and part of that is that we're being silenced with the red hand, and then part of it is we won't be silenced anymore. And that's the symbolism behind that hand.
And Darla Black is also a member of the Red Ribbon Skirt Society and a couple of other groups as well. Anytime you get in a movement like this, it's important to get young people involved in it and young people believing in it. How are you managing to do that, and how is that going as far as getting young people to pay attention to something like this?
Well, because of COVID, it kind of slowed us down, but what we had planned was we met with Dana Brave Eagle with tribal education, and we were going to go into the schools, starting with Oryx High School, and go into the schools for prevention, awareness, just to let them know, because we have that main highway, Highway 18, that goes through our reservation and on into Rosebud, down in that other part of the Ocheti-Shakoni territory. And so I think educating our young people, for one, and I traveled to Orlando, Florida with a group of ROTC when I was vice president. And when they competed in those games, it was so beautiful, because what they all did was the men, the young men and the young girls, they put the handprint on them. And let me tell you, I had an experience with that too, because they wanted me to do it too. So one of the young girls came and she put paint on her hand, and when she put it on my mouth, I felt anxiety, like it kind of makes you feel like, you have that little general understanding of being abducted, And so when we all came out and they were competing in those games, ROTC games, they were athletic. Everybody, they gained attention. Everybody was asking them, why the red handprint over your mouth? And it was beautiful because they were already educated in it, what it stood for, that our women are being abducted. And ironically, the hotel that we were staying at, there was an attempted abduction the night before. So it all kind of tied in together. So I think the important aspect of it is, first of all, we need to educate our young and bring them aware that it's not safe. You need to pay attention to your surroundings, and not just your surroundings, but who is around you, And so the more that we educate our young people, I feel that it would be a little safer for them. At least they'll have that general awareness. So in the middle part of March here, we'll be going into Oryx High School. And not only that, but now we're bringing in self-defense along with Lily and I will be doing a presentation there, and we have another young lady that joined us. She has a cadaver dog for searching, so we're partnering with her. One of the problems that we have the awareness part of it and the prevention part of it, but we were missing the searching part of it with the cadaver dog. But now we partnered with her, so I think we have a full team that would be able to help the people.
Now, talking about getting young people involved, how important is it to get non-Native people aware and involved in this? And how do you do that to get them interested in caring?
Sure. Well, you know, we do go out and we do a lot of awareness education campaigns. And so say, for example, we went down to Shadron and went into the college. Okay, so we were able to resource and speak to the cause to a lot of college students. And a lot of the college students, of course, they were Native, non-Native. We did that at Black Hills State as well. And it's really important to work with our non-Native community. And also, I mean, the same thing's happening to them too, you know. And bringing it back to them to say, what if it was your, and I've been in situations when I've spoke to this to a crowd of non-Natives, okay? And so they look at me like, wow, we didn't know this, but then they also look at me like, we don't have to worry about that. Okay, but when I start to bring it home to them, they go, "Oh yeah, that could happen to my daughter or my granddaughter," and there are stories out there about that. And sometimes people don't want to hear about it. They don't want to hear it because it didn't happen to them. Okay, but we as Lakota people, when it happens to one, it happens to all of us. You know, and so that way of thinking is different. But I've had an opportunity in those settings to say to them, what if that was your granddaughter that was staying with you and she went? What would you do? You know? So we provide that education and awareness to everybody because we need to make sure that people in our communities are watching out for our women, you know? So.
Now we have a Native American Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland now. Does that give you hope that there may be some more progress on the way?
I'm going to have Darla speak to that.
Going back to your first question about bringing awareness, bringing non-Native people in, I think it's critical. I think it's critical because in order to combat this situation, we need everybody's eyes. We need everybody's ears. And not only that, one of the things that we're seeing, so I'm very, very glad that you brought us here, because one disparity that we see, you look at Gabby Petito's case, for example, that hit CNN, that hit every news organization all over the United States, and it was on Good Morning America. Did our two women that went missing and murdered in Pine Ridge, did it make it to national news? No, it didn't. I always believe that if we could make it into national news like that, that gives the people an idea of the magnitude of what MMIW is. And not only that, of course, everybody has to go before grand jury. And so I think the more awareness that we give to the non-Native people, because in Shadron, we not only met with the college, we met with the high school students. We also met with the chief of police, and you know, the end result was really beautiful there. He said, what can I do to help? What can I do to help you? I want to partner with you. You know, because a lot of our Indian, you know, communities, our Indian members, they live all along the border through there, clear into Lincoln, Nebraska. So I think bringing non-Native people aware of what we do. For example, I had a T-shirt on, and we finished eating at a restaurant, and we came out, and this lady was parked beside me, non-Native, and she said, you know, she said, I was reading your T-shirt, and she said, what can we do? What can we do to help? So I kind of gave her a brief education. You know, if you see something, don't look the other way. If you see a young woman that's being abducted, report it. Take the license plate number down. Get a description of her. Take a picture. Help us out. You know, report it because it's happening. You know, our women are being abducted, even here in Rapid City, you know. So now what was your second question?
I don't
Deb
remember
Haaland.
now.
No,
Oh,
Deb
Deb
Haaland.
Haaland.
Haaland, yes.
Deb Haaland. I feel that having a Native Secretary of Interior would benefit. I think that what needs to happen amongst Indian country is there has to be unity. There has to be unity. There has to be solidarity in combating this situation, because sometimes you have tribal politics that are negative, sometimes positive. But I think when we're dealing with, I mean, look at this young lady from my reservation, that still touches my heart, who's only 17 years old. 17 years old. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm an aunt. And that could have been my family, So when that hits home like that, we take it seriously. And I'm hoping that Deb Haaland will organize. First of all, we need to educate our law enforcement. And not only that, but we need to come up with standard protocols, how to combat this. And what we talked about at one of the meetings, what I brought up was we need to do they have an amber alert, but we could do a silver alert. A silver alert works with the weather system, the weather, if a tornado is coming, for example, an alert will go off on your cell phone. Well, if we get a report of a woman that's being abducted, they could send it out on silver alert where it'll come out on your cell phone. Description of the vehicle, who it is, maybe even a picture. We've got to get better at this because we're losing people,
We got to take a break. We've got to take a break. We'll be back to continue our look at missing and murdered Indigenous women when we come back with this month's edition of Focus. Welcome back to Focus. We're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women. Darla Black is here from the Red Ribbon Skirt Society. Darla, I don't have a whole lot of time left, but what's the solution? What has to happen next for this situation to improve? I
believe if we create legislation. A lot of the laws are older now that are on the books. And MMIW is kind of filtering into our neighborhoods now. And I think if we begin to look at it, sit down, meet with the law and order committees, and create some type of legislation where it'll be a protection. Not only that, how can we get this information out across? I know Facebook is pretty quick. Whenever someone's missing, they post it on Facebook, everybody shares it. But I think if we create laws, standard protocols, and on the reservations, we need to get rid of the 24-hour waiting period. And I think once we update those, I firmly believe that things will get a little bit easier when it comes to a woman that comes up missing. And Lily Mendoza is the founder of the Red Ribbon Skirt Society. If somebody wants to get in touch with your group, wants to get involved with your group, are you always looking for help and people and input and money and all of that?
Yeah, we are. All of that. And our office, our Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's office, is located at 524 7th Street, which is located right in my bookstore downtown. Upstairs, as well as that's where our healing room is. So anybody can walk in and they can learn more about the cause, and we're always looking for volunteers. There's a lot of work to be done. So we are always looking for volunteers. And my phone number is 605-431-8231. It's my personal phone, but I'm always taking calls, and so I'm willing to take a call from anybody that's interested.
Okay.
As well.
You feel like you're making some progress?
You know what? I really do kind of feel like we're making some progress, a little bit at a time. But we are educating community and people across the board about the issue.
We are out of time. Lily Mendoza, Darla Black, thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching this month's edition of Focus. Hope to see you again the first Sunday night of next month. Good night.